I made sure the hemp seed oil I used was a commercial variety off the shelf that any horse owner could go grab, because I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. What I found was we had the hemp seed oil tested to 1 part per million to find out what cannabinoids and THC and all that it contained, and it did. It contained cannabinoids, but we're not surprised by that. We then tested the serum and synovial fluid, and we were able to achieve a limit of detection of 50 parts per billion. We didn't find cannabinoids at any time point, even after a month of supplementing hemp seed oil.
That's Dr. Kristine Ely from Virginia Tech. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I will be talking to Kristine Ely about her work at Virginia Tech, where she has been researching the effect hemp seed oil has on inflammation in horses. It's fascinating work, and as you heard in the intro, it has other implications. We will also hear about her time as an extension educator in Wisconsin, how she got into horses in the first place, and of course, her journey into hemp. But first, we will take a quick sponsor break and then come back and hear my conversation with Dr. Ely. Today's show is sponsored by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. So just the other day, I was talking to Ken Elliott from IND Hemp, and he was wondering if we could use this sponsor message here on the show to urge all of our listeners to go see the movie Common Ground. This is the sequel to Kiss the Ground that came out a few years ago. Common Ground is premiering around the country this month, and Ken really wants all of us to go see it. He says, and I quote, "Regenerative farming is a big part of the environmental solution, and hemp is regenerative farming. They is us, and we is them," he says. I'll put a link to the Common Ground website on the show page for this episode, and you can see when it's coming to your neck of the woods. This episode is brought to you in part by the National Hemp Association. The NHA is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. that advocates for sensible public policy and regulation. The NHA is dedicated to building a sustainable future and promoting economic development in rural communities. Become a member today and join a thriving community of people with a passion for all things hemp. Learn more at nationalhempassociation.org. Okay, welcome back. So before we get into my interview with Dr. Kristine Ely, I wanted to, just catch up, say hi, see how it's going. Here we are in the last week of October 2023. Next week is November 1st. It's exciting. Halloween's coming up, one of my favorite holidays. And this is generally one of my favorite times of the year. I did want to let you know that in the next few days, I will be publishing a special podcast episode. This is the Cornell episode that I've sort of warned you about a few weeks ago. I've been working on this for months and months. It's sort of a joint project with Cornell, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's an in-depth look at their Masters of Professional Studies in Integrative Plant Sciences with a concentration in hemp science. It's super cool stuff and perfect for hemp nerds like you and me. Anyway, just wanted to tell you about that and, just generally thank you for listening to our show. It's an honor to make this show, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Anyway, let's get into my conversation with Dr. Kristine Ely. Dr. Kristine Ely, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well this morning. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing okay. It's really nice to chat with you again. We met this summer out at the Montana Summer Hemp Summit in Great Falls. And, we'll just jump in. You have recently defended your PhD at Virginia Tech. So I wonder if you could briefly describe your work and your research, and then a little bit later on in the interview, we'll get into what you're doing there. But just give us the introduction. Introduce yourself. Yeah, let's start there. Start in the beginning.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really glad to be here talking with you. I'm following up from that excellent meeting we met at in Montana. So, yes, I just defended my PhD about a month ago, and it's a really great feeling. It's been a long time coming. It took a few more years than I anticipated. But yeah, so we're going to talk a bit about it, but my dissertation was entitled Hemp Seed Oil as a Novel Source of Polyunsaturated Fatty Acids and Its Effect on Inflammation in Sedentary Horses. So a lot of people tend to ask, okay, well, how did you get there? And I really started with a love of horses ever since I was young. And I kind of avoided studying them for a while. I think I was very worried about job prospects. And after spending a couple of years as an extension agent, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to go back. I want to, study horses. I want to help horses. I want to help horse people. And I want to marry the two in such a way that it brought me to Virginia Tech to study at the time under the equine extension specialist. My advisor actually left partway through my program, and this is where this hemp and horses idea was born. Okay. I got picked up by a good professor that I've known for many years, and he was at the time doing hemp research, but he is a plant guy, and so he knew I was a horse girl. He's known me for a decade, and he's like, all right, well, if you can come up with an idea that marries the two together, we can make something work. And so I was given free rein to study what I wanted with hemp and horses.
Wow.
Yep.
Let's back up a little bit. Tell me, where did you grow up? Where did you first, fall in love with horses?
All right. Well, I'm a Midwest girl. I was born and raised in Northern Illinois, outside of Chicago. Realistically, closer to the Wisconsin border, but all our Wisconsin friends just call me a flatlander, even though we're miles apart. I grew up just riding at lesson barns. I didn't own horses. I grew up in the suburbs, didn't know about agriculture, but I knew I wanted, at the time, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I discovered in college, you could study things like agriculture and animal science. And so I went to college and I discovered agriculture. And it was the most amazing thing. I fell in love. I fell in love with cattle and sheep and pigs. And I was already in love with horses, so I didn't need to re-fall in love with them. But I decided during undergrad that I didn't think vet school was for me, but graduate school was.
And then, so where'd you go for graduate school? And then how did you get into the extension program? And tell us about that.
So even though I was born and raised in Northern Illinois, I actually moved to Tennessee for school. My grandparents had retired there, and we had some extended family. I had a cousin who used to take me riding, so I really fell in love with the Southeast. I did an undergraduate degree at a small school, Tennessee Tech University in Cookeville, Tennessee. And then I proceeded to pursue a master's degree in animal science from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Go Vols. From there, I thought, well, I knew I wanted to continue my education. I just didn't know where or what or anything. And so I needed some time. And I had fallen in love with extension, the applicability of taking research and translating it to, the actual end users and working with the public. And I really loved that. So I decided I was going to take a job after my master's before going back to school and get a little real world experience. And lo and behold, I was lucky enough to land a job 45 minutes from my hometown in extension.
Nice.
So I got to move home for 3 years and spend that time with my family. And it was great. I learned so much. It was cold again, which was unfortunate, but you get used to it.
What kind of work were you doing as an extension agent there in Northern Illinois?
So I was actually in southern Wisconsin. Like I said, I lived very close to Illinois, but I lived in Illinois. I drove up to Wisconsin every day. But So as an adult extension agent, I mainly ran educational programs focused around livestock and horse programs because that was more my specialty.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been hired on as kind of a secondary agent for the county because we were getting ready to host a big like technology trade show, and it happens every year, but it takes about 4 years to plan. So they kind of needed someone else to come in and help with that. And so, it kind of gave me a lot of exposure to a bunch of different things, but yet I still got to do a lot of the typical county agent positions,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the programs that they ran. And so I really enjoyed it and I loved it, but I realized working with all the specialists that I would rather be at the state level. I wanted to be the one generating kind of the research,
Okay.
making that impact that benefits, the horses and the owners, and the environment. I'm also quite passionate about the environment.
So was hemp on your radar at all at that point?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
But to be fair, I technically started my PhD journey January of 2017. So
Okay.
before the Farm Bill kind of came through.
All right. So you knew you wanted to go get your PhD. You knew you wanted to be sort of in the world of equine health.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know about hemp yet. It wasn't I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. So describe like how you first, well, let's see. Should we go on with your story or should we just like cut to the chase and find out about your hemp?
I do. Obviously, I can tell a story.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can cut that out.
Tell me the story. Like, tell us the story of the PhD program and how you got to hemp, and yeah, take us from there.
All right. So yeah, I moved to Virginia in January 2017. Of course, within days of moving there, it snowed, which I was down in the southern part of the state, so I was questioning, did it follow me? What did I get myself into? I thought I was moving away from snow. But no, I originally started my program in the equine extension field, and I was moving into nutrition-based research.
This is at Virginia Tech.
At Virginia Tech, yep.
Okay.
And so I was on campus for a semester, and then I got to move up to Northern Virginia to work at the Middleburg Agricultural Research and Extension Center, or the Mayor Center.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the gold standard for pasture-based nutrition research. So a lot of our kind of wonderful researchers in that field have come through this program. And if you've never been down to Middleburg, you should come visit. It's amazing.
I never have been, but yeah, I would like to.
Yeah. So I was really into wanting to study pasture management and its effects on the horse, and study nutrition and looking at different health parameters and how nutrition influences those. And at the same time, I was given the opportunity to learn how to run and manage, a 400-acre farm, which, you can't buy that experience.
Right. That's good experience.
It is a lot of fun. So unfortunately, partway through my program, my advisor got a wonderful opportunity to take an industry job. And you can't falter for that. I didn't really have any good options since there's not a ton of horse researchers normally at, a single university. And so I took some time off, and I was a local equine specialist for Southern States, the Farm Cooperative.
Okay.
Which was, a lot of fun, made friends, made some connections. And that's when I started the conversation with my now current advisor. And he was doing some hemp work. He had another student doing hemp research. He originally offered me a position working with hemp and cattle, but I was very persistent. I wanted to study horses.
Okay.
Yeah, since I had kind of avoided it for so long, thinking, I'm not going to have job possibilities. I knew at that point there were jobs out there and I would be fine.
So when he suggested hemp, what were your thoughts there?
I'm not original, but I immediately started thinking about the nutritional aspect of it. I was like, oh, this could be super interesting. And I knew I needed to do some background reading because I was like, oh, well, I was probably like everybody else in that, oh, cannabinoids, CBD, THC, oh, it'll never go anywhere. I was like, let's see, what can we make of this? And we started talking more about the seed and, about the fatty acid profile and how it's unique and how that, okay, so what makes it unique? How could it influence the horse? What is feeding hemp seed going to do? And that's kind of where the idea of hemp and horses was born.
And so what were some of the like initial questions you had about, hemp as an ingredient and its effect on the health of the horses? Like I imagine you sort of started with, hypotheses and then you sort of do some research and like I've heard about the scientific method.
Yeah, right. Big picture coming in. Yeah. So when we started talking about polyunsaturated fatty acids, now just, the kind of brief overview of your polyunsaturated fatty acids, your omega-6 and your omega-3 families, like we hear about with fish oil and flaxseed. And, we talk about how important these are. And the reason that we talk about them so much and how important they are is because they influence the inflammatory response. So initially, I started thinking about hemp seed oil and fatty acids and think inflammation. Well, horses deal with a lot of inflammation.
Let's stop there. Tell me about the inflammation that the horses deal with. And like, how does it manifest? What kind of problems does it cause? What are the normal solutions?
So inflammation is twofold in that you're going to get normal, healthy, acute inflammatory response. And that's not what we're concerned with, right? We need inflammation to help with healing from tissue damage or infections. That's really important. But, horses also, and so do humans, deal with this concept of chronic inflammation where they maintain this low level of constant inflammation in the body. And so we know some ways how, where that comes from. So when we have horses that are overweight or obese, adipose tissue is a big producer of inflammation, and that's kind of a simple answer, right? Okay, so lose weight. That'll help. But we also deal with inflammation through, horses are used for sport. And so you deal with inflammation from in joints. And there's also this concept of inflammaging, where as horses age, they develop this low level chronic inflammation, and we just don't have a clear understanding of why or how, but we just develop a greater level of inflammation.
And then how does that affect the horse? It slows them down, it causes them pain. How does it manifest in the horse?
Yeah, so inflammation is associated with a variety of, diseases. It's not necessarily, we believe it's 100% cause, but they occur at the same time. So you look at your osteoarthritis, you look at gut inflammation. Gut inflammation is going to lead to, poor nutrient absorption. You're going to have things like metabolic syndrome and laminitis. So there's a lot of ill effects with inflammation that it's an important aspect to mitigate and moderate what kind of, inflammatory responses we have in the animal.
Okay. And how does that happen? I mean, imagine there's like medicine that's been developed that sort of attacks the problem, but yeah. I'm guessing like to solve these problems through diet is probably like the simpler and better way, right?
Well, realistically, what I imagine, yes, we have a pharmaceutical approach to, mitigating inflammation. And, for your acute inflammatory attacks and, getting things under control, very important. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories are a very important tool. But yeah, the concept of, mitigating inflammation through diet is extremely desired, especially by owners and veterinarians. We wanna feed a better animal that feels better, is more natural. I do envision, being able to create this quote unquote anti-inflammatory or less inflammatory diet that works with whatever extra pharmaceuticals a horse may or may not need.
All right. Well, so let's talk about your research and what you found, right? So you started studying, you were feeding hemp seed oil to some horses. Take it from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I completed a feeding trial last year between May and September, last year being 2022. And I used I had 6 thoroughbred geldings, and so I completed what we call a crossover. So every horse served as their own control, and every horse got to eat both the control and treatment. So I top dressed diets with hemp seed oil, and I was targeting the amount of hemp seed oil based on the content of, we haven't really talked about the specific fatty acids, but hemp seed oil specifically, what makes it so unique and interesting compared to other plant sources is it contains a unique fatty acid. So I mentioned the omega-6 and omega-3s. So typically we associate omega-3s with being anti-inflammatory, right? Where our omega-6s are a lot of times categorized as being pro-inflammatory. However, hemp seed oil contains gamma-linolenic acid, which happens to be an omega-6. But when it's supplied in the diet, it produces anti-inflammatory eicosins.
Okay. Can you say that type of omega-6 again? You said gamma llama ding dong something. I say it again. Sorry.
Gamma-linolenic acid.
Gamma-linolenic acid.
Gamma-linolenic.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's
you can also call it GLA.
Okay, I've heard of that.
A mouthful.
Yeah. Okay. And that's unique to the hemp seed oil?
Yep, to have that direct fatty acid is unique to hemp seed oil, or hemp seed, I should say. Oils pressed from seed. It's found in a couple other types of plants. So your borage oil, your evening primrose, ahi flower, but it's not commonly found because plants don't contain the necessary enzymes to insert the appropriate double bonds.
But hemp does. Yeah.
And so that's what, in my opinion, makes hemp so unique. Also, the fact that you have a couple of these other sources, but I think hemp realistically has the greatest potential from a commodity perspective.
Right.
So,
okay, so if you got your 6 geldings and you're feeding them, you're top dressing, so you're putting it on their feed.
Yes. All right. So we had to talk a little bit about GLA. Yep. That's how I determined how much hemp seed oil I was going to top dress. So giving them about 3/4 of a cup per day, very reasonable amount of oil to feed.
And how do you determine that? Is that like based on the weight of the horse or how much food you're giving them?
I targeted actually how much GLA that would deliver to each horse. So that gave each horse 5 grams of GLA.
Okay.
Because we didn't have, there's not a lot of research on GLA in the horse, and especially none using hemp seed oil. And so I felt that was a reasonable amount of oil to feed and a good target to outline.
You said they were their own control. So I imagine you did a period of time where you didn't feed them the hemp. Well, did you do the hemp first and then the no hemp, or the other way around?
So I did half hemp, half no hemp, and then they switched. So the horses got the hemp seed oil, or if they were the controlled and on, hemp seed oil for a month. We took weekly blood samples, and before and at the end of that period, we took muscle and synovial fluid samples as well. And then I put all the horses back on the same diet for another month because I wanted to capture a washout period. Okay, we can manipulate by adding the fatty acids, but how quickly does it say go back to normal?
Right.
No. or are there any lingering effects? And so same sampling time frame of, taking blood weekly, as well as a first day and last day muscle and synovial fluid sample. And then they switched treatments and we commenced and did it again.
Okay.
So it was about 5 months of feeding, because I had to have some acclimation to, the herd dynamics and diet and all of that.
Okay. And then, so I imagine you saw results in the blood work, I imagine, but did you see like visual results? Were you able to look at, your hemp fed horses and be like, oh, they're the hemp ones because of their shiny coat? Or like, were there any like visual changes?
It's a little hard to, I was so close. I was there every day feeding them. And sometimes when you're that close, it's hard to say yes or no. So this study started, I got the horses beginning of May. So they were still kind of, all of them still shedding out their winter coats a bit. They all looked very shiny to me. And I can say none of them refused the hemp seed oil. We didn't have any weight differences. So I designed the diets to be isocaloric, or that, they had the same amount of calories. So, one wasn't getting more or less. We didn't lose weight or gain weight. So we did achieve that. But it's hard to look and say, oh yeah, they look different.
All right. So keep going. You're feeding the horses. They're not rejecting the hemp. They like it. Maybe do they like it? I put that in myself. I don't know.
I mean, they didn't refuse it. And, for any listeners who deal with horses, they can tell you horses can have a particular palate. And they can sometimes reject different feedstuffs. They're sensitive to smells and tastes and flavors. So the fact that they ate it is good.
Yeah.
So it was acceptable. I know my horse, I've given him some hemp seed oil, so, he eats it. I've heard many stories of other people feeding their horse hemp seed oil, and, they really like it. So yes, it's palatable, which is a good thing in the horse world.
Did you see a reduction in inflammation based on their diet?
So what, kind of how we broke it out, what we were looking at first is, we wanted to measure the rate of accumulation of the different fatty acids within the horse, right? And we focused on blood, synovial fluid, and muscle. So we were very successful in altering that fatty acid ratio in a rapid time frame.
How quick?
3 weeks to achieve a new baseline, which is pretty quick in looking at fatty acid work in horses. And then by 2 weeks, removal of the fatty acid, they went back to normal, or their baseline starting.
Oh, okay.
And that's good, because we need to demonstrate that we can manipulate those fatty acids, and it is indeed a good source of that gamma-linolenic acid. So, we did see that, at least in blood and synovial fluid. For muscle, these were sedentary horses, which means that we weren't exercising them. They were, basically just at maintenance. And so we did not see a lot of response in the muscle, but that's not really abnormal. I think if we added an exercise component, or maybe increase the amount of fatty acids or the length of supplementation, we could have seen differences there.
And you think that may have improved like muscle building, or what? How do you
it would
hypothesize?
It would have altered the fatty acid content. The question as to whether it improves anything is answered, by then we looked at inflammation.
Okay.
Again, we had sedentary horses, so we didn't see a lot of response in inflammation, but that's not that abnormal. We did see a change in an inflammatory cytokine called IL-1 beta, and it was greater in our hemp seed oil fed horses, but which we didn't necessarily expect. But we saw that over both the supplemented and non-supplemented period. So we're, not really sure if it's truly related. And my goal is to try and answer that question a little better with another study that induces some kind of inflammatory challenge.
Okay.
So to kind of parse that out. There's so many things that can influence the inflammatory, response. Alpha beta is important in many things that, it's hard to say for sure.
Are there things that you can say for sure from your research?
For inflammation, not necessarily, but we have leads to follow up on, which is, the point of good research is to basically generate more questions than answers.
Right. Okay.
So we can say we can alter our fatty acids. And then I think one of the other big pieces of this story is the fact that while cannabinoids, they're kind of a hot topic, cannabinoids are not produced within the hemp seed itself, but the hemp seed develops in specialized leaves that we call bracts. And those bracts are highly populated with trichomes. Trichomes produce cannabinoids.
Right.
It's excreted as this sticky resinous substance. And so during harvesting, that's, resin sticks to the
outer casing of the shell.
And then, as it can contaminate the outer side of the shell. And then when we go to process those hemp seeds now with the shell on with the cannabinoids, that's further contaminated into the hemp seed oil, but it's such a minute amount. So I made sure the hemp seed oil I used was a commercial variety off the shelf that any horse owner could go grab because I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. And what I found was we had the hemp seed oil tested to 1 part per million to find out what cannabinoids and THC and all that it contained. And it did. It contained cannabinoids. But we're not surprised by that. We then tested the serum and synovial fluid, and we were able to achieve a limit of detection of 50 parts per billion. We didn't find cannabinoids at any time point, even after a month of supplementing hemp seed oil.
50 parts per billion. So that's teeny, and you didn't see anything there.
Didn't see anything.
Okay, which kind of makes sense because there wasn't a lot of contamination going in the first place, right?
Absolutely. And if you dig into the literature a bit about research specifically supplementing cannabinoids to horses, it takes a bit more of a dose to be able to observe cannabinoids within the horse.
Okay.
And then the question comes down to what's the biological relevance, but those are for other researchers to answer, not myself.
All right, because you are not really concerned at all with cannabinoids.
Not at all. I want 0 cannabinoids to show up in any of my samples because I want to make sure what I'm studying with fatty acids, if I see an influence on inflammation, I want to know I can say it's because of the fatty acids and not, something along the lines of, well, maybe it was cannabinoids, maybe it was fatty acids, maybe it was a combination of both.
Because cannabinoids are said to, also help with inflammation, right? I mean, that's why people take CBD is to help with inflammation.
Yes. And I have no idea what the dosage rates are, at what point it does start to influence that. But yes, that is part of the reason where I don't want someone to turn around and say, well, how can you be sure it was the fatty acids? And this way I could say, well, we didn't measure any cannabinoids, at least to a limit of detection of 50 parts per billion. I do feel it has to be a caveat because there are, labs out there that can achieve an even greater sensitivity. Now,
is there any kind of industry standard or limit or, like acceptable cannabinoid content?
No. The currently it's a 0 tolerance policy. And I just think that, with hemp being, allowed for just the last only 5 years or so, that it's such a nascent industry that, we just need to generate the research to be able to influence some of these different policies. I'm sure that policy was put into place because CBD and THC products were probably flooding the market.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't thinking about the hemp seed oil, hemp seed meal, and all of those products. So I'm hoping this research can help influence and maybe, give some separation to, okay,
Right.
we have that for CBD products, but, we need to come up with a realistic, if they tested this, we know that maybe they were having some hemp seed oil.
Right. Because it's like people don't understand, they don't know that the cannabinoids aren't in the seeds.
Right.
So it's
Or,
like always
and that it is such a small amount. I will say, when I first started telling people, and actually, honestly, even to this day, when I tell people I study hemp and horses, the initial reaction is, oh, are you getting horses high? No, I'm not.
There was a study out of somewhere in Europe, maybe last year, that the media kind of like picked up and ran with about like somebody
Was
was
it the
getting
dairy
cows high or
cow?
something.
Yeah.
That seemed a little, I don't know,
It was,
unfortunate.
I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of conversation around that. It kind of did some harm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you defended your dissertation
Mm-hmm.
just like a month ago.
Yeah.
Right. And what was that like? What were some of like the questions that, I've never been in one of those like, defend your thesis situations. I imagine there's like a panel of people wearing robes and maybe they've got wigs on and they're looking at you sternly and you're, what happens in there? And, what was it like?
Oh, they weren't wearing robes or wigs, but I do have a committee. Um, and I had my lab mates were there, and I actually offered it on Zoom because one of my committee members couldn't be there. So I actually had a bunch of people, old friends and old colleagues from as far as Europe.
Wow. Like in the studio audience. That's exciting.
Yeah, on the Zoom. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Actually, it was a little traumatic at first because my computer doesn't have much of a battery, so I forgot to plug it in, and right as I was about to get started, my computer shut off.
Yikes.
But it was all right. A little break the ice, right? So it how it goes is you'll give a presentation between usually 30 and 45 minutes, and you put together, a visual representation of your dissertation. So go through a little lit review, describe your study, talk about your results, and then, talk about future directions, things like that. And then, yes, they're open to give you questions. So I had a few people ask about the cannabinoids contamination issue. I had several horse people in there with me, so they're wondering, is this something I can feed my horses? Would it be good for them? And I not only does hemp seed oil have this gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, but we also talk about the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s, and then hemp seed oil sits right around 3-to-1. We don't have a defined fatty acid ratio requirement in horses, but grass is going to be a lot closer to like a 1-to-1 or even higher in omega-3s, depending on when it's harvested, and a bunch of different things. And so we do generally make an assumption that keeping the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio closer to a 1-to-1 probably is better for the horse.
Okay.
And so that's that's important because some of the oils we use in horses, because typically when we feed an oil or a fat, we're feeding it as an energy source to increase the energy density on animals that maybe don't have the ability to consume, because they're only going to eat so much in a day. And so usually our oil sources are going to be a corn or a soybean oil, and they're going to be a lot higher in these omega-6s. Mm-hmm. Not saying that eating more omega-6 necessarily causes inflammation, but increasing the consumption of omega-3 can influence the anti-inflammatory. And then obviously with hemp seed oil, adding in an additional anti-inflammatory fatty acid that, isn't normally found in the diet, kind of gives you kind of two fronts there.
Okay.
So yeah, so I had some people ask about that, which I do think, adding it to your horse's diet has benefit, especially if you're already feeding some kind of oil. There's a lot of benefits to having an oil in the diet, from skin health and coat hair health, whether you're feeding to gain weight.
Is there protein in the seed oil?
There is not. So the oil is going to be like 99% fat. There's going to be it does have some vitamin E. And so that's, and there's going to be some, that the aromatic, that, the aroma for hemp seed oil, that unique nutty smell, is going to be like your terpenes and flavonols and stuff, and that there's some other little compounds, but there's no protein unless it's not purified. If there's like a contaminant, there could be some protein, but typically it's close to 100% fat.
Okay. Now there is protein in the cake, but that's a different part of the hemp feed story. We'll talk about that.
Yes, that is, and it's got its own list of benefits. But yes, and I also want to start looking at some of that, but I've got a long list of things I want to do.
Right. So you defended your thesis, and then they bestowed upon you this great big, I don't know, what did they give you, some sort of prize?
A pat on the back. No, so you answer questions from the public, and then actually spend some time with just your committee, doing another, an oral defense, and going through and they ask you different things, not necessarily just about the information in the study, but they want to know that you're ready to be a scientist out in the world. So question your study design. Why did you do this? All those various things. And then they give you edits on your dissertation, and you get 2 weeks to finish them. So while I passed the oral portion and got crowned doctor, I did still have work to do. I had to work on my edits, 2 weeks to get those in, and I just submitted the final ones a couple days ago.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And then that will be available for the public as soon as the grad school releases it.
Okay.
And everyone can read all about my dissertation. And ideally, the next goal is to get everything published into scientific journals and continue my work.
And you'll continue your work at Virginia Tech?
I am staying on at Virginia Tech as a postdoc. And so I'll be doing a few different things. I'll be working on some bale grazing and cattle projects, but I've submitted a USDA grant to continue my research in hemp seed oil on horses that I don't hear back until the end of December. But I've got some other ideas for small research project in hemp and horses that I think I can make happen in the meantime. So
awesome. So I have a handful of further questions for you, and maybe this. How do I say this? What motivates someone to want to pursue a PhD?
Oh man, that's a great question. Naivety, is that how you say it? Being naive?
Naivete.
Oh, there you go. I always joke with people, if I knew then what I knew now, would I make the same decisions? And it's kind of like, I don't know, but then I'm like, yes I would. But
awesome.
Passion, you gotta have passion and dedication, because it's not easy. But you're dedicated, and you really like what you're studying.
Right, and you're curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's but I always I always caution people where I'm like, are you sure you want to do that?
So is there a connection or a correlation, or like what can we learn from your research with hemp and horses? Is there any, like, what can we learn for human health from what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the inflammation response is similar in humans and horses. So, we talk about, the whole reason we got excited about fatty acids and omega-3 is, back in the 70s, they discovered the Greenland Eskimos, and they're primarily fish-based diet and their high intake of omega-3 and their reduced incidence of heart disease is kind of what spurred all of this, right?
Right.
They just don't have the same limitations with, hemp seed oil is already approved for humans to consume. So they kind of have it a bit easier. They're just also not going to eat 2 cups of it in a day.
But yeah, you touched on something there that's sort of like a point of contention and frustration in the hemp space, and that's, yeah, like the FDA has given hemp seed, hemp hearts, all that stuff that has GRAS status, generally regarded as safe for human consumption, but you can't feed it to commercial livestock. And I know in horses it's a little different because, we're not really eating horses in this country, but still, like, can you talk about some of those issues with the illegality of hemp as a livestock feed?
Yeah. So we had a great meeting back in last October in Oregon where we started touching on this, and you're right, it's a little point of contention because humans, they did get GRAS approval, but we can't feed it to our livestock for fear of contamination and carryover into your meat, milk, and eggs.
Cannabinoid contamination, right?
Yeah,
Especially
cannabinoid.
THC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from the livestock side of things and the meat, milk, egg consumables, the concern I can understand a little bit. It's frustrating, but I can understand it a little more because, we don't want to go down the road of having to put another label of, oh, may contain cannabinoids, right? But, the government's concerned that humans should have an understanding of what they're consuming and have the choice. So you're kind of stuck in that position. But, you hit the nail on the head where we don't eat horses here in this country. We don't eat companion animals. And so trying to justify that, hey, we shouldn't be held to the same standards while also walking the line where, there is some benefit. Horses kind of got looped under because we're a livestock species. Some consider us livestock, some consider us companion. I think that my research will hopefully help make the case to remove some of those restrictions, I hope. And start the process of, putting in some kind of feed application. So at least we can open some doors for the hemp producers to have another outlet,
Right.
And give horses, another commodity to work with as far as, okay, well, here we have another fat source, or, if we have the hemp seed meal, we have another protein source. That's good for everybody, the feed makers. I know I don't study, the hemp seed meal in this, but the protein is really only second to soybean meal. It's so high quality. It's got all the right amino acids. So it's got a lot of potential.
Where did you source the oil that you used? I know you said you got a commercially available hemp seed oil, but can you talk about what that was and where you sourced it?
Yeah, I actually got it donated by a company out of Canada, HBS, and they were wonderful to work with. I needed to make sure that I had a single batch or a single lot of hemp seed oil, but I needed 2 5-gallon buckets. And it was really nice that that was just one thing. Of course, research is already expensive enough. So to not have to worry about uh, adding that to my budget
Right.
was great. So yeah, I can't thank them enough for helping me out with that. Donations mean a lot to, you know, researchers in general, but especially of course researchers with tight finances.
So when we met out in Montana, you had given a presentation to the summit, and that was what, an overview of your research.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how were you received with that? What sorts of questions did the industry ask you?
Yeah, it was really well received. You know, cannabinoids is really always at the forefront. You know, they want to know that that helps because that's the hang up. And so that was a big question. We talked about, you know, I went through and I gave a presentation to try and break down how the fatty acids, how it impacts them, how they're absorbed, digested and absorbed. And so, you know, talking about how I think that it'll affect the market, because like I said, I think it has potential as a commodity, and can compete up there with, you know, soybean and all of them. And so it generated a lot more conversation after my presentation. I made a lot of really good connections, and hopefully that's a lot of leads I get to follow up in the coming years. And I built a lot of network. I built my network quite a bit. It was nice, but it was very well received. A lot of people were interested and came up to me afterwards and, you know, enjoyed the information. I definitely was not necessarily in a horse crowd of a room. And so I think it was eye-opening that the work is being done in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And that I took it upon myself, you know, not from a hemp company doing this work. I was just interested. I had a question. I was interested, and this is what I wanted to study.
There you go. Awesome. And so what's next for you? You said you're doing your postdoc work at Virginia Tech. You're going to launch a few more research projects.
Yeah. So like I said, I submitted that grant, the USDA grant. So fingers and toes crossed, I get funded. We'll see. I actually have been in conversation with some of the hemp companies. I think I want to do some small projects on hemp bedding compared to traditional bedding, its effects on compost development, and then that's effects on the soil health. So how do we kind of start to bring things a little bit full circle, maybe?
Yeah.
So that'll be really interesting. I have a colleague I was talking to at a conference this summer who wanted to visit about doing some hemp seed meal and protein amino acid type work. So I need to follow up on that. Of course, I'm still interested in my hemp seed oil. You know, I've got people interested in looking at what can we do maybe with these hulls, the hemp seed hulls. You know, do they have a role?
Mm-hmm.
So in the short term, I've got a few things to keep me busy, but long term, you know, my goal is to continue all kinds of work with hemp and horses. I'm passionate about it. I'm excited for the future. It's nice to kind of be on the ground floor of something and you just feel like you can make a real difference.
Do you see yourself staying in academia or at some point maybe moving to industry?
I'm actually headed more towards industry. I want to do some of this work as a postdoc. Again, you know, part of the reason of, you know, staying on there is since I did submit that grant, I didn't want to immediately run out, get a job. What happens if I get the grant then? Because I wrote it for a postdoc position.
Right.
So trying to see what that's all about. Plus, you know, adding tools to your tool belt is extremely important. Like I said, I like the environmental stuff as well. And I think everything kind of plays together. So the more well-rounded I am, I think the more of an influence I'll have. But yeah, I think I'll probably head towards industry. I could see myself one day going into academia, but I'm pretty excited to follow the industry and see where that takes me at the moment.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Kristine Ely, congratulations again on successfully defending your PhD. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great talking to you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much, Eric. I'm so glad you invited me, and I'm glad we can make it work.
And just like that, the show comes to an end. It's over. We got to get out of here. We got stuff to do. Anyway, thank you for listening to today's show. My name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. But don't take my word for it. Check it out. Get yourself a copy. Heck, I'll mail you one if you want. Just let me know. You can email me at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. If you got questions, comments, concerns, ideas for shows, whatever, you just want to chat, I'm up for that. So anyway, yeah, hope to hear from you. Hope you have a great Halloween. And until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper or in Ithaca, whichever the case might be. All right, thanks. Goodbye.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2023 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. What is Tin Bird Shadow? Google it.